Alright guys, it's Chatterbox Reviews, coming at you guys with my review for the Twilight Zone Season 1, Episode 7. Alright, so going into this episode, it was definitely, we knew what it was going to be, right? The title of this episode, Not All Men, right? So we knew what they were kind of going for in this episode. Of course, the kind of teaser or the preview, I guess, for this episode last week kind of showed us, right, what they were going for. And then you get some great actors. To me, this is the best kind of cast that they've gotten for an episode yet. You get Taissa Farmiga, Ike Barinholtz, Luke Kirby, and Rhea Seehorn. So to me, the best cast so far, right? And so you get these actors, you get this concept. I'm on board. I just want to see what they were going to do with this one. And I know some people would definitely be hesitant on seeing this, but you know what? After all, I felt like it wasn't like the kind of social commentary of it wasn't all that bad. I think it was actually a good way of twisting that, you know what I mean, and putting that in this type of episode. But the episode itself didn't really work that well for me. So, and that's not really what I expected going in, compared to some of the other episodes so far with the social commentary, kind of on the nose type of stuff that we've seen so far, especially with an episode like Replay, episode 3. So anyways, get to my recap here of the episode. We'll try to keep it shorter. Then get to my rating, favorite character, and some more overall thoughts of this episode. And maybe talk about next week's episode where we saw the preview at the end of this one. Love to hear your guys' thoughts of this episode. What did you think of it? Of course, how does it compare to the others so far for you? And did it kind of meet your expectations, right? What did you think going in? How did it feel after watching it compared to that? Love to hear whatever you guys want to share, as always. So, also, if you enjoyed the review, please leave a like and consider subscribing to the channel. Would really appreciate it. Going to be doing Twilight Zone reviews, of course, for the next 3 episodes, the last 3 episodes of this season. So, love if you, keep coming back for those. But anyways, let's get into a little bit of a recap for this episode. And I will say before, it's not bad, but it's not great. That's what I'm going to leave it as for now, and I'll get to more of my overall thoughts. Just that is kind of my overall kind of recap of the story itself in this one, and that's what I'll be talking about in this recap. So, this week's episode tells the story of a woman who meets with her work colleague to watch a meteor shower, but during it, they go out and find one of the rocks, and when the man's name is Dylan, played by Luke Kirby. The man finds one of the rocks, right, and actually touches it, right, and takes it home. And when they get back to his place, he suddenly becomes very aggressive, disrespectful to her, trying to make advances with her, and she tries denying him, right? She doesn't want to, really, she's not, I believe they start making out, and I think that was consensual, because I think she was also, doing that as well, but then he got really aggressive, right? And so that is the whole thing they're playing on, right away. I mean, within 2 minutes into this episode, you get the title, Not All Men, right? And you know exactly what they're trying to do here in terms of both social commentary and the overall narrative of this episode going forward. So finally, she's able to get out of the house, and at this point, we see how angry he is that he couldn't get what he wanted, right? Or that he couldn't have sex with her, I guess, is what kind of his objective was there. And she's able to get out of there. So, and of course she is, very kind of distraught and very just kind of really confused at this point, because he was being nice to her before that point. It seemed like he was very respectful. We see before when they're meeting in the meteor shower, and before he puts his arm around her waist, he says, "May I?" Stuff like that. And so it seems like this meteor shower really changed him very suddenly too. So it seems like she's very distraught, but also kind of confused about what just happened, right? So something is up with the meteor shower at this point. So Jordan Peele then comes in, and says at the end of that little intro sequence, he says, "Meet Annie Miller. Annie has always seen the world as a place where she could maintain control if she just played by the rules. But tonight marks the beginning of a change, both in her and the idyllic town she's always called home. On the eve of her sister's birthday, Annie will be forced to contend with an event well out of her control and a simmering violence about to boil over into the Twilight Zone." So I like this thing here, a couple keys here, which is where she could maintain control, she would just play by the rules. Of course, that's kind of referring back to the social commentary they're trying to get at here, with her not being in control anymore and the men being in control, at least in this episode, in this kind of world they set up in. And also, the eve of her sister's birthday, I feel like they stress it a lot in the beginning, but it ends up not meaning much at all in the rest of the episode. But anyways, so simmering violence, and that is pretty much exactly what happened. So then we see next day at her work, her boss gives her job to Dylan. So the man, of course, who she was just with last night, right? And so, of course, this kind of gets to her, and obviously, makes her feel kind of, I'm not exactly sure how to describe it, but she's not happy, right? She's kind of disappointed, I guess, that she would have to give the job up to Dylan, right? And again, playing at this thing that the boss is giving the man the job instead of her, the woman. But it also is, the boss does state here that Dylan's been there a long time. He's one of their top guys, and she's just starting there. So it is interesting. They kind of play at these undertones, but it kind of does make sense within the episode. Anyways, so then as she goes out in public, she realizes all the men are being more aggressive, or at least it appears like that to her, which at this point in the episode, I thought, okay, this is interesting. Sorry, she's going to a yoga class or something here. So this is interesting, right? I thought, so it's just her that sees all the men like this, and no one else does. Like, everything, they just seem normal to everybody else, but to her, all the men seem more aggressive. But it turns out they didn't do that. But I would say, I would have loved to see that story. I don't know, that's just me. I would have liked to see that play out where she thinks all the men are super aggressive while no one else sees it. That would have been an interesting thing. They've used that a little bit with the kind of the Nightmare at the 20,000 feet, and of course the original used that a lot. And I kind of like that story. But anyways, they don't go with that, and it just turns out like the whole world knows it, and it's happening, or at least this whole town knows it, right? Anyways, so then we get at her sister's birthday dinner, and this is really when the episode starts. Her husband and boss seem well-mannered, and so does her nephew, right? So it seems like at this moment, not everybody is like Dylan, or at least not yet, right? So they go to check on their neighbor's hose in their backyard, which is running red water from the meteor shower, perhaps, right? And we get this idea throughout the episode that this meteor shower, there's something in the water, right? There's something in the air that is making them do this. And at the end of the episode, that whole thing is just defeated, and the whole sci-fi thing playing on it really has no bearing on the end of the episode, which is a bit disappointing. Anyway, so the women go out together when Mike, played by Baron Olds, who is Ray Sahorn, Martha, her husband, and a couple of the other guys, and the boss, right? They stay at the house. So anyways, Dylan appears at the bar when the women go out to have a couple drinks. The women think he's handsome and want to call him over, and Annie against it, of course, right? These women don't know what happened to her prior, and she's not willing to divulge that information yet, and so her sister kind of egging her on a little bit here. Of course, she doesn't know what happened. So basically then Annie heads out and says she needs some air because she can't really comprehend, right, Dylan coming over there and having to deal with him again, having to face him necessarily after what just happened. Because again, I do think she obviously has that feeling of maybe violation, right? But also, I think she's generally confused, and she's just not sure what Dylan is going to do if they see each other again, right? So anyways, so as she comes back in the bar after she, finds her nephew there with another guy, and they're saying they're going to go drink at the docks or something like that. A fight breaks out in the bar between the men, and one man gets uber aggressive all of a sudden, almost like superhuman, like Hulk, right? Like this guy just breaks out, like Hulk, and just starts, punching guys out and, laying guys out, right? Pretty much. just really uber strength, and also we see kind of like his veins popping and his eyes kind of turn red, and that's what we see throughout the whole episode with these men, right? So then Annie and the others quickly are forced to leave the bar for their own safety because they don't know what these men are going to do. So even on their way out, a man tries to stop her to talk on his bike, and so at this point, and he, calls her a bitch and stuff too, so very kind of violent, aggressive, right? Very similar to what we saw with Dylan. So the sisters realize at this point it's not just Dylan, it is all men. And at this point it is confirmed too that it's not just Annie who sees this, it's everybody. Then we see even Martha's own husband, Mike, who kills the biker who follows them home. We see that whole sequence. And by the way, Ike Barinholtz was amazing in that scene. Like, he really only had that one big scene in this episode, but I think that was maybe the best performance in that one scene of this entire thing. Like, he was really great in that performance. Obviously, it's not a likable character, it's not a likable performance, but you gotta give it to him. I mean, that was pretty good. Really believable. So anyways, so he goes out and kills this biker, and he comes in very, very aggressive and even tries to attack Annie here. So her husband was talking about being woke before and seemed to be very supportive, and now even he has turned. So this is a turning point in the episode for Annie and Martha, and they finally realize, okay, no, right, it's all men. All of them are doing this, and they've all become more aggressive, which I did like. I liked the point where, in the dinner table before, he was talking about being woke. I thought that was more of just kind of on-the-nose, throwaway dialogue, but it actually does kind of come back and mean something here. At least that's what I got out of it. So then Annie says it's just the meteors and it's just the men. So making that point, right? Or sorry, yeah, it's the meteors and it's just the men. So making that point there about what has gone on. And Martha's also very very suspicious, I guess, and kind of, she doesn't buy it right away, right? But then as the episode goes on, like I said, everyone buys it. After getting verbally and physically attacked by her husband, Mike, right, with, Annie he tries to physically hurt her, right? Because, she's basically interrupting him talking to Martha, I guess. Martha ends up knocking him out with a pan. And so Annie and Martha then get out of the house. They're forced to leave. And on their way out, they get sideswiped by a guy as she's backing out of the driveway. Which, it's like, that was kind of, I don't know. She didn't even look, right? She didn't even look. She just backed out, and all of a sudden they get hit. Which I just felt like was kind of a shock value thing. Like, oh, it's a loud noise, kind of a jump scare, if you will. Anyways, so they get sideswiped, and as they get out of the car, they see the streets. And it looks like a damn apocalypse, right? Like, to me, like, it went 0 to 100 here real quick. I mean, like, like, they see the husband, okay, he gets aggressive, he tries attacking them, and then all of a sudden they go out, and it's just like the world has ended, right? And it's like riots. It looks like a damn apocalypse, right? This is like stuff from The Walking Dead. So it did go a little bit too far, a little bit too quickly for me. But you'd rather have that than these elongated, bad-paced episodes, right? So anyways, a woman then walks down the street holding a knife. So we get the idea that she just had to stab her husband or boyfriend or something like that, and get away, something like that. Anyways, chaos has ensued at this point. The women go and try to find Paul, who's the nephew and Martha's son, at the docks. But once they get downtown, they discover riots and places on fire, as I just talked about. Just complete chaos at this point, really. Just insane. But they want to go and try to rescue Paul. So they go to hide then at the gas station away from the men, who seem to be all attacking themselves. Which to me was really, like, that was the most surprising thing I think about this episode and what they were trying to do with the social commentary, is that, of course we see Mike kind of try to attack, and we see Dylan at the very end trying to attack Annie, but for the most part of this episode, it's just the men being more aggressive with each other. You don't see any women in that downtown section. Now, is that supposed to mean that they've already kind of abused or attacked the women, and now they're just taking it out on each other? I don't know, but to me, it just kind of seemed like it defeated the whole kind of purpose, or at least what we thought going into it, of the social commentary of these men being kind of toxic to other women. It seemed like they were being kind of toxic to each other, more so. So anyways, that was just my thought at this point. again, they're the only women in that downtown square, and the only reason they actually get attacked or even approached by one of these men is because they're on his property at this gas station. So, again, interesting. Maybe they are playing out something deeper here, but that's what I got out of it. Martha then grabs one of the meteor rocks and thinks it will give her strength too to fight back if she holds it. And then we get a little bit of a moment of, is it going to work? And of course it doesn't, right? But since she's a woman, it doesn't give her anything. And again, I believe this was more symbolization here that they don't have the same abilities to fight back. And this was really kind of on the nose scene here, trying to speak to something that didn't really just really didn't work out into that scene where they were trying to contrive kind of symbolization here. Anyways, it is what it is. So then Annie reminds her it's just the men, right? It's not us. We cannot, these rocks don't affect us. It's just the men. And so Martha finally gets this kind of in her head. So when they finally arrive at the docks to meet Paul, they find that his friend, really his boyfriend, we find out, they're more than just friends, has went insane too, or has became kind of uber aggressive, right, and tried attacking him since he didn't want to drink the drink with that meteor rock in it. And he didn't want to kind of be involved with that anymore. He didn't want to, it was just a really bad situation for him, right? And so he ends up locking him inside the boat, and he is able to, he's able to get out unharmed pretty much onto the docks. And everything is fine until Dylan comes out of nowhere. So Andy and Martha are able to rescue Paul. He seems unharmed. He seems normal still. Everything's fine. And Dylan comes out of nowhere with a massive rock on a chain walking towards Annie. This was, I don't know, this was extra. I mean, and I get it, right? It kind of fits into the narrative. We've seen them being just this violent before. So I do get it in context of the episode, but it was almost laughable the way that he just came in. It was kind of like a horror trope that we've seen so many times. And it really wasn't scary to me. But anyways, so meanwhile, Paul starts to turn then as well as Dylan approaches, and he's not much help here. So Dylan yells at Annie, asking her why she doesn't like him, right? And then tries attacking her by choking her with that chain. Really kind of brutal, really crazy, right? But then he gets distracted by the helicopter in the sky, by the light, and Annie is able to push him into the lake along with the rock, which sinks him then down to the bottom. So this, to me, this made no sense. This made no sense. If you're trying to do a message here, and this scene of Annie finally kind of defeating Dylan, right? Basically not having to answer to him in this scene, and just, pushing him in the lake, and presumably he drowns and dies here. What? How is it that he just gets distracted and she pushes him in, right? This scene was pivotal to me. Way more pivotal than this next scene I'm going to talk about, where she tells the guard no, which seems like they were trying to say that was the turning point, or that was the message of the episode. But why isn't it this? Why isn't it her defeating Dylan, or kind of finally being able to fight back against him and beat him? So this made no sense to me. I don't know why they did this and why it was so easy for her to do this. The only reason she was able to do that is because he got distracted by this light and she was able to push him. I don't know. Didn't make any sense to me, or it did make sense, I guess, in the narrative, but I'm just saying, if you're trying to do that message, you're trying to do that, you're trying to convey a kind of lesson here, or trying to show Annie finally overcoming this, why is it not in this scene? Why is it in this later scene, right? Anyways, so suddenly Paul snaps out of it too, which is interesting because we haven't seen that yet. We haven't seen any men snap out of it. Then a group of rescue men come to find them, and they are saved from the men, or saved from what's going on right now in the town. All right. So then we end off the episode with back at the rescue camp. The doctors still don't know what caused the men to be like this, but they think it has to do with the meteorites. Now, Paul then reveals to Annie and Martha that he had a piece of rock the entire night, and that it was in his back pocket, right? And he says that he was able to snap out of it anyways, even though he had this rock in his possession. He says it's not all of us, right? Which is interesting, right? Because that's a total stark difference from what we've seen throughout the rest of the episode. He says that there's no cure for it, but instead it is always inside him. But the difference is he chose not to let it out, right? He chose not to let out this uber aggression, or this kind of disease, if you will, as they call it in this episode. Then Annie calls the meteor a placebo, which doesn't really make sense. Again, defeats the whole purpose of the first half with raising all these kind of red herrings about, oh, what does this meteor stuff do? Oh, it's got to be involved with the meteors. So it really just shoots a hole in the entire kind of development of that plot in the beginning of the episode. So to me, I don't really understand why you had to bring all that up and allude to it so many times when it didn't end up being anything in the end. Anyways, so Paul's saying he had free will over the decision to go rogue or not. And to me, he's essentially saying that the other men decided to indulge these feelings themselves. Perhaps they were pushed to, right? Perhaps they were pushed to by these rocks, placebo or not, right? They thought that they were being pushed, but they weren't actually forced to, right? They were the ones consciously deciding to go uber aggressive or to go rogue, right? And that Paul himself was able to choose. It was a choice for him whether or not to go there, and he chose not to. So really interesting here, and again playing on that point where, you know, it's not all men, which again really defeats the whole thing of the episode. But I guess this was the twist that they were saying was, no, it's actually not all men, right? And again, this piece back to the social commentary of them saying, no, it's not actually all men, but they do always have a choice, and all of these other men made this choice consciously. So very interesting twist, to say the least. I didn't expect this actually in the episode, but it was kind of interesting. So anyways, then this part just really got me. As they walk out, the guard makes a remark, right, about Annie smiling, which, you know, obviously it's kind of, you know, he comes off as a dick, right? I think that's fair to say, you know, him asking her to smile. But again, this is contrived. You know, what army guard in that scenario would really do that? And even if they would, what are the chances that it would happen this moment in time? And it looks like otherwise that guard is not affected by this because he's not from that town, and he hasn't been exposed to the meteor rock. So anyways, it's really contrived, but Annie is able to tell him no. Right? She tells him no, and is very emphatic too, showing that things have changed and she is able to stand up to him because she wasn't able to say no before to Dylan that night that he was being very aggressive with her. So, again, a turning point and a twist in the episode, but why didn't we see this with Dylan? And it wouldn't have been as a contrived scene, it wouldn't have felt on the nose as this. So, to me, it didn't make any sense, it made more sense, let's say, to do that with the Dylan scene rather than this scene and her telling him no. And then my one question is, where are they possibly going? Like, they leave this rescue camp, this tent. Where are they possibly going at this point? Like, are they going back to town to these men? Right? There was no cure talked about. Everything seems to still be going on. Where are they going? Like, what is this ending, right? Like, where are these women possibly going now? It seems like they were going back home, right? I don't know. That's what I got, and that makes absolutely no sense. Why wouldn't they be staying there at the camp? Again, it just seems like they were trying to get to the point of her being able to say no to the man, that they just forced that whole entire scene at the end there. Anyways, Jordan Peele comes in at the end and says, tonight Annie Miller found herself in the center of a mysterious and violent epidemic. What she encountered was no material disease, but rather a plague of conscience. Again, speaking back to the point of, no, this was free will. The men had choice over these actions and the way that they became uber aggressive and they went rogue, right? One that gave men permission to ignore decency, consent, and fear. And tonight, all it took was a few innocuous little rocks to turn men into monsters here in the Twilight Zone. So again, right, it's giving the men permission. These rocks gave them permission, but they were the ones who decided to go for it anyways. That is the end then of the episode, and I did like that last Jordan Peele line. I think it did actually kind of bring things together well, where some of these other lines at the end have just been really confusing and kind of add to the confusion at the end of these episodes. Alright, so in terms of a rating for this episode, I'm going to give it a 4.2 out of 5. To me, I think this was maybe the best acted episode so far. And I know I think I may have said that for one of these other episodes, but I'm allowed to change my mind, okay, with the new episode. Anyways, yeah, great acting in this one. Luke Kirby was awesome in his role. Ike Barinholtz, like I said, I think gave it the best performance in that one little big scene he had. where, he's trying to attack Martha and Annie there. I thought that was an awesome scene by Baron Holtz. And typically he's a comedian guy. He's a comedic guy, just recently in Blockers. He was in Eastbound and Down, which is, I think one of his first roles. Anyways, and so I felt like he actually really did a great job. Taissa Farmiga was great in this one, and Rhea Seehorn, so great. I really wish that she would do more stuff like this, where I could see her outside of Better Call Saul, because that performance is really tailored to that character. And let me tell you, she is amazing in that show. Don't get me wrong, but I just want to see her show a little bit more depth, and I feel like she did in this episode, and I thought she was really great. So, to me, I think it's the best acted episode so far. It felt more like... So this is an interesting point here, and I think this actually would make the episode a lot better. So this episode itself, and I know there's tons of examples of this, but this is just one that I know really well, is it felt more like a It's a Good Life episode, where they try to recreate that in episode 5 a little bit, where in that episode, it's less of a moral kind of lesson or message in that one. It's more of, okay, this is a world where one little boy has powers and can control everybody, including the adults. Let's see what this world would be like, right? Let's throw these random characters into here. Let's do it on a farm and just see how this plays out, right? And then even Rod Serling says at the end of that episode, he says, well, we just wanted to show you this. There's really no message here, right? This episode felt exactly like that until the end. And to me, this episode would have worked so well that way, right? Like, don't try to convey a message. Like, just give us this world of all men go rogue. And this craziness kind of ensues, chaos ensues, and let's see what these characters would do. Let's see how they would react. Honestly, and to me, that would actually work a lot better than what they tried to do with this ending, right? To me, right? Because they still can try to convey a lesson anyways, but this episode actually, I think, worked pretty well with just the fact that, okay, all men are aggressive, right? Just picture this world, and let's throw these characters into it and see how they react. But they decided to go against that. And there's really great Twilight Zone episodes, including this one, that didn't have that message, right? That just was like that. Threw you in a world where something was totally different than our world, and let's see how these people, how regular people, rational people, would react. That would have worked well in this one, but that's just not what they did. So to me, it was a bit disappointing in that aspect. And again, this lesson didn't really work within the narrative, and that's why I felt like that ending was just really kind of contrived and forced at the end. So again, an abrupt ending, right? It's like, where are they going? It really felt like this episode needed about 10 more minutes, which to me, again, though, it was still too long, this episode. I feel like they could have cut it down by 5 or 10 minutes, but it really felt like that ending, it felt like there was another commercial to come, and then they would have a last ending sequence, but they didn't. So to me, it just seemed like a very abrupt ending, and that also speaks to the fact that this story just felt really rushed. I mean, again, they were trying to, build this world and show us this scenario, but then they were also trying to squeeze in a message at the end, and it just really came out rushed. So to me, take some more time. I thought they could have paced it a lot better. Again, a little bit too long. Really kind of tighten it up and just explore this a little bit better, because to be honest, yeah, the social commentary was on the nose in this episode, but again, I felt like it actually would have worked well with just showing us this world. Again, without necessarily a message or lesson that has to be clear, just show us this world. And I feel like that would have talked just enough about that social commentary and raised that awareness that they were trying to do in this episode. So to me, yeah, of course you want to talk about some of the dialogue in this one, quite on the nose at times. And it is what it is, and that's been happening in these previous episodes too with the social commentary. That's what last episode did so great in that I felt like the dialogue was actually some of the best dialogue that we've had so far, where it wasn't forced. But anyways, those are my thoughts on this one. And I guess those are my overall thoughts for it. It was not bad. It's not a bad episode. It's just not great, right? I feel like, again, it would have been maybe even approaching great. Again, if they didn't try to convey a message and squeeze that in at the end, but they do, and this is how it turns out. But anyways, and great acting too. It was really great. And cinematography for this one was great too. I do want to bring that up. The colors, the visuals, and that's something that has never been bad so far. I mean, it's always been good in these episodes. The budget looks like it's there. The quality is there. So definitely can't knock on that. All right, to end things off, my favorite character for this one, I'm going to go with Annie Miller, played by Taissa Farmiga. As I said, these 4 actors were powerhouses in this one. I feel like they really did great. But Taissa Farmiga was, of course, the main character. She was just on American Horror Story recently, the recent season. I feel like she did a great job in that, and I think she's a good actress, and I think she's kind of up and coming, so I think we'll see her in more big roles in the future. I thought she was great in this episode. Maybe even perhaps playing herself in a way, right? She's only 22 in real life. She was basically playing that age, right? In this one, and I felt like it was just really realistic dialogue for her in this episode. So I felt like it was really a role tailored to her, and I felt like she played it really, really well. And of course, we see with that Annie character kind of taking us through this story and through this world as our perspective. And it was interesting then to see her kind of dynamic shift at the end with being able to say no. But again, I just felt like that was a contrived scene to get there, where it could have been better if they showed that in that Dylan scene. But anyways, those are my thoughts for this week's Twilight Zone episode. Thank you guys so much for watching. Again, I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on this one. What did you think of it? And of course, how does it compare to the other episodes for you so far? Anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. Once again, thank you so much for the support on these reviews and the channel in general. Really, really do appreciate it. But again, guys, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next week for the Twilight Zone Season 1, Episode 8, Point of Origin. Looks like it is going to be a very interesting one with perhaps some scares as well. So, looks really interesting, and we'll have to see what that one has in store next week.